Hello there, and welcome to the ClueCon Weekly podcast studio. And I'm very happy to be joined this week by Sebastian Schumann from Deutsche Telecom. Sebastian, it's great to have you along. Thank you very much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Hey, David, thanks for the invitation. I'm very good, and I'm very excited to be sharing a bit what we're doing around programmable telecommunications today.
We're very pleased to have you. Programmable telecoms or software-defined telecoms is a very, very big thing for everybody watching. And so we're looking forward to talking about that. Where are you joining us from today, Sebastian?
I'm based in Berlin, and my unit is distributed across Germany, in Frankfurt and Bonn. We are an international team, basically, but with my former team, I joined out of a small Berlin group that drives innovation in DT.
Great. And of course, this is where we came across each other in Berlin at a previous Kamma Illio World. And so it's nice to reconnect with you. Now, Deutsche Telekom, very big company, and I'd like to talk about them and using open source and things like that. But before we do that, Sebastian, I wonder if you could give us a little bit of background about you as a man in this industry in terms of perhaps the different kind of jobs you've done that lead you to where you are today.
Yeah, I'm glad to do so. So I've been in the telco industry or telecommunications really for a long time. So I've studied with DT already. I've studied at the University of DT. That studies brought me into Slovakia, where I've been starting my career. Worked there from 2006 to 16. I was responsible there for core networks in the beginning. So I've built the first IMS in the group there. Slovak Telekom was the first fixed carrier that had a complete digital network, let's say. So all old soft switches were out there. They were very far ahead with soft switches in the beginning, then with IMS. In the end of my time there, I've dug very much into WebRTC. So I've done a few talks on telcos and WebRTC and did a project there, set up an internal tool that would paste your a URL consisting of your email address in every email footer from Slovak Telekom colleagues, so you can be contacted at the click of a button.
Right.
And what was important there for me was actually to show the telco use cases that are not those that telcos usually talk about, right? Usually you would hear them putting a WebRTC gateway in front of an IMS. I always thought that's pretty boring because all you can do is essentially telephony. At least that's what the IMSs are built for, and I wanted to do much more. So I've done some work on that. In 2016, I've moved to Berlin from Bratislava. I've joined a DT startup called Immer, which was a telecommunications provider spin-off that was trying to work completely software-based. So what we did is we built an application that runs on top of a programmable telco stack, like a classic communications app you find these days. But one of the unique points of it was an integration into the core network of one of the opcos. So essentially, when somebody would call my number in Slovakia, or when I would make a call, it would be routed through the core network of Slovak Telecom, and my number would essentially be virtualized there. So it was a very interesting proposition, I guess. DT decided to close it down in 2018, and that's when I moved to the unit where I'm in today. It's the international network infrastructure team in Deutsche Telecom engineering. I'm an architect there, working on voice programmable communications and innovation, and essentially try to do modern telco things. We set up an intercarrier voice platform at the moment in the cloud, public cloud and private cloud. And one of the things I want to focus on today is my work on programmable communications, CPaaS, however you want to phrase it, that I'm trying to drive from there and trying to get established in the community I work in, but also across DT. If I can help it.
So it seems like Deutsche Telekom has featured very, very heavily in the things that you've been up to, and that a common thread there is innovation and pushing things forward. And so we're very interested to hear about programmable communications. Before we get there, though, I wondered, just in case anybody watching has not come across Deutsche Telekom before, I wonder if you could tell us a bit about them as an organization and the kind of things that they're into, because they're a very large and I don't know whether sprawling is the right word, but they, they do a lot of things, don't they? So I wonder if you could kind of give us a little bit of information about that.
Yeah, I can. So I'm some general overview. I guess you can. Many people, I guess, in Europe know Deutsche Telekom because in many of the European countries we have subsidiaries. You will recognize ourselves with a magenta T. It's not pink, it's magenta. And we are also, so we have a few daughter companies. One of them is T-Mobile in the US. So I guess in the US, if you know T-Mobile, you know Deutsche Telekom. And in Europe, we have many opcos. They are mostly, so in the US, it's only mobile. In Europe, it's fixed and mobile. So in many markets, we are a fixed mobile carrier. We have IPTV in many markets and many. So I'm not pitching usually DT, but we are a huge company, more than 200,000 employees worldwide, more than 80 million customers. In the billion revenue area, let's say, and pretty big. Yet we the activities we focus on, or mostly focus on, are not really in the area of programmable telecoms. So when I look in, I guess I did a piece on an event the other day where I compared us with Twilio, right? And even though our numbers are so significantly bigger in terms of overall, that's all because of the access, right? That's all because of the connectivity we provide and the people we have there. But when it comes to our revenue, connecting people or driving also A2P traffic, which is what many CPaaS do, I think we are pretty much comparable, and we have some gap to close, in my opinion.
Right, yeah, as you've explained, a very, very large organization.
Yeah.
And of course, driving innovation is very key there. So please, tell us a little bit about your work around programmable communication and where open source components may or may not fit into parts of that.
Yeah. So my real touch point started back at Immer when we did build a consumer application that was used to connect endpoints, right? And we used commercial programmable communication stack that was part of our backend, next to some commercial components that like commercial stacks that like Sigtran and SIP and so on, that we integrate in the network. When Immer was shut down, we kind of started transitioning this to open source components, and that's really when I tried to use these components for programmable telecoms the first time. I have some history with Kamailio. Back in Slovak Telekom, we've set up Kamailio for a product, right? We had some residential broadsoft traffic back then that we wanted to migrate off the platform because it was too expensive. We've set it up. We've set up OpenSIPs there, and I've had a very good experience. I'm more of a user of it. I'm not a developer, but I can configure it, make it do what I want it to do. So we've tried to replace that stack. We're pretty successful in it, but it was not really programmable, and that was when I looked also into programmable in terms of that it had the API features, let's say, inbuilt that you wanted exposed, right? SMS is in it, of course, and also for programmable voice, you usually have a bit more components you would need to add, like text to speech, like an endpoint host for the markup languages that interact with the platform. So I've had a look at RESTCom back then, which was also the company Telestag is a long-term partner for me. I've worked with them back in Slovakia, where we've set up actually a platform that was the result of a hackathon I've worked on. So I've won a hackathon, and we managed to get that into a product enabler build. We've used it also in a different context back at Immer, and so now what I'm looking at is the mix of a stack, I guess, for an MVP, where those components, RESTCom and Kamailio, are parts of for the programmable telecoms part. And what I like is the flexibility it provides, right? You find a lot on the internet if you want to. So it's an MVP that I'm setting up, right? We're not yet. We're trying to get the Programmable Telecom started, we tried to get it understood inside the company. We tried to also explain that it's more than just an HTTP API, because a lot of products we source have HTTP APIs, but it's really, I would say, a bit more than that. And with this stack that I have at hand, it's very easy to modify it. And yeah, so that's really the, I would say, commercial, or sorry, the open source part when it comes to the programmable stack. We also use an API gateway for making the platform available to end users. That's also partially open source software. So I guess what is good is that when you don't want to be dependent on a vendor, in our case, and we're very often dependent on vendors when we want changes, and when you want to go ahead yourself, try to get started with something. So I'm the kind of person that tries it himself, and if I cannot get further, I want to know I can call somebody that can help me, but I want to understand what's happening, and I want to also understand what the software does. And I guess that's exactly from a commercial perspective where open source is very good. You still have, you own the software, right? Whatever changes come in are essentially accessible to you, but you also have a large group of consultants you can ask. You're not really dependent on one of them, right? If something doesn't work out, you go to another. And I guess that's one of the benefits that you don't have with classic vendors, right? There you're dependent on their product and their roadmap. And so maybe that's a short summary of my my work with open source software and my attempt to continuously, of course, use it. And also products that we buy in different contexts, I actually want them, if they're not open source, at least to have open APIs, to be able to use features they have, to be able to augment other services, right? It doesn't make sense in 2020 to buy a voicemail system, for example, if it doesn't have an API, because I may not want to use the voicemail system, but I may want to open up the voicemails on a website for the customers to download, and I can only do that if it has an API. So I guess open source goes very much in hand, for me at least, with openness of features, with exposure. I'm less religious on the actual open source license or on the open source model. I'm not a contributor myself, since I'm not a developer, but I like the openness and the possibilities it enables businesses, and that we are not locked in is a very strong argument for open source components.
Yes. So now you've actually started answering the question that I'm going to ask next, but maybe there's some other bits you can add in. I was just noticing that your path into open source was actually the opposite of a lot of people's, because a lot of people get into open source because the low barrier of entry financially. So when they're starting something, they hunt around, they don't want to spend the money, or maybe they can't spend the money on a certain technology, so they find an open source alternative. And sometimes they kind of grow in that open source alternative and stay there. And lots of very successful people do that. Others, of course, find that they want to grow out and go into something more commercial. And so they go from open source into something commercial. You came from exactly the opposite angle, where you were using commercial software and commercial products and services already, and then you found your way to open source. And so the question I had in mind, and as I said, you started to answer this in different things that you said, but I'd like to ask it anyway in case there's more, is what differences did you notice as you transitioned out of the commercial world and into open source software, in terms of the usability, the support? You've started to answer that particular part already, but also just using the product in general terms.
Yeah, I think actually, so it's even a funny anecdote I can add, because when I was pitching the alternatives we had for this commercial product with a certain price tag attached, it was actually it seemed too good to be true, let's say, right? So the costs we would have with the open source software was, of course, an integrator we need to pay, we needed to buy hardware, but once it's done, that was pretty much it. And so there was no limit on users, there was no licenses, let's say, right? It was just set it up. If you want to change, of course, you need to pay for the change, and you also, as a carrier, you want support, so you have a support fee. But all of that was lower than we used to pay, and the platform itself was significantly lower. So of course, the managers back then, and we're talking here 2008-9, the managers were asking, like, where's the catch? And when you say there is no catch, they don't believe you initially, right? I was back then, I was, I don't know, 22, 23 when I suggested this, and having next generation or the previous generation, or even before that, manager sitting in front of you, of course they have doubts. And it was really so in that position, it was not even cost driven. I think they would have been glad to spend, I don't know, 10 times more and be, with a safe choice, buy some established company that is cheaper than the current one, but still somewhat safe. But because it was so cheap, they gave it a try, because they thought, well, if it doesn't work, we can still do something else, and the money we would have wasted wouldn't have been a big loss. And I think that was the chance. So we set it up. We discussed our concrete requirements in workshops. We got it built to fit our purposes. When something wasn't as we needed it, we could adapt it. The integration was, it was maybe a bit not as everyone would be used to, right? So you get a requirement, you work directly with the integrator for CDRs. If there need to be, you do your first shot, there needs to be adaptations, then the adaptations are done the next day. That's flows that the partners in the company were not really used to. So they thought, okay, we've received some configuration, it doesn't work. How long does it take now, to get it back? And we got it very instantly back, and we got it. The support we saw when we were in the project from the team was significantly, with a smaller team, the support was much closer to us, right? We were much more engaged on a direct base, and I guess that convinced many people. And in the end, it also convinced, of course, the operational team that needed to operate it. The transition was smooth. I think a couple of years later, I learned from them, it's one of the most stable platforms they actually operate. So I think it really was the confidence we had in it, because we used it. The discussion we had, I always, and there's actually a pattern until now, I was always comparing it with the IT world, right? Nobody has hesitation to run an Apache to serve a website. Nobody has hesitations. But we had hesitations running the equivalent of an Apache for voice calls, and there was actually no reason for it. And this is something that I tried to make a case of, and got the trust from my direct management to do it. We got the trust then also from bigger management to go ahead. And so far, I have to say we were pretty much convincing everyone and in the projects that I've tried. And I forgot to mention one interesting thing. In the end, I guess the world many people grew up in the telco world was very complex. These days, it's all just software, right? So when we worked with in ST, we also had an attempt, or we actually did it. We set up a Volta platform based on open source software, right? It's Voice over LTE, and again, this also worked in the end. And people were surprised, it's VoLTE, it's complex, but in the end, it's all just it's software running in the end devices, it's software running in the network. You connect the pieces, the protocols. In the end, it's no longer rocket science. And I guess that's that's why there is less hesitation. I guess even politically, you see now telcos, many companies buy into open source, buy in the advantages. They want to own the stack. Now you may even need to justify why it's not open source what you're buying. While I needed to justify back then why I'm buying open source. I think it was not really open source that was the issue itself and what it means, or even contributing or anything. It was just the flexibility, right? Even if it would have been closed code and you say you own the code, it would have been the same thing. So nobody was really convinced about open source as such that I've met. Back then, it was more the approach that it's open, that it's flexible, and that actually I knew the stack well enough. I could make promises, and I had the right partners to deliver those. And this actually, and until today, holds true. And I guess in the end, that's what convinces people, right?
Yeah, yes. The word is confidence, really, isn't it? If people can have confidence in that solution. So this was all around IMMA. Can you tell us a bit about the functionality you were trying to achieve with IMMA? Because I know you've done a talk at Ilio World about it, and I'd be interested to hear some of that.
Exactly. So what we tried with IMMA was it started off as a bit of a mass market product that tried to be, let's say, yet another messenger. With some integration into carrier networks, in the beginning it was, we were never trying to be the forerunner of building the next WhatsApp or building the next Viber, or however you call all the apps. But what we try to do is really free the constraints that the carrier world has, like limiting your telephone number to a physical thing inside your phone. And we're still really there in the year 2020 with most carriers. So I have a phone number. I can use it only in this single phone fully.
Right.
And we try to limit this. And we try to limit this not by doing big modifications in a carrier network, but by actually connecting the platform to the relevant points, use some smart signaling, and essentially send the calls to the IMER platform to be in charge of the stack. So whenever you would get a phone call, the STP would send a trigger to the platform. The call would be routed to IMER. And when you would make a call using even your legacy dialer, we would also send it to IMER. So the legacy inbound and outbound legs were connected to the platform, and we decided how we deliver the call, if we deliver it over IP or if we deliver it over the legacy stack. So we had the option of calling a phone number with the legacy connection and going through the back end, the IMER network. If somebody called me on my legacy phone number, I would route it to the IMER platform and could answer in a browser. But I could also have a fallback to my phone if I wouldn't have IP connectivity. So that was really it. We tried to free the phone number from these boundaries. I guess there was a bit more to it if I would have had my IMER pitch decks now ready to look at. But that was really it, right? We tried to not revolutionize how the big teams in carriers build their new IMSs and how they transition to VNFs and NFVs and all of that stuff. We said, it can be done easier. We built a stack following a greenfield approach. How would we build a carrier in 2016? We built that carrier like it. We ran it on top of a hyperscaler. It was compliant even with all possible rules. It was the first, I think, project within the group that was compliant communication service delivery on a hyperscaler. And we connected to those relevant points in the carrier network with the least possible effort, right? So we set an MO trigger, an MT trigger. We had the route set to us. We had a billing data delivered to them in the format they wanted, so they didn't need to adapt to us. We told them what services, what's one of the formats you process. We adapted it. We sent it to them, and in the end, your calls from the IMER app are part of your phone bill, and you could basically use telephony like email. In short, I guess I could have done it short. We tried to be telephony like email.
Right.
You could do it for a while. Now we're shut down. Now you can no longer do it, unfortunately. But I guess that's the point, really, to evolve, not just talking about telephony or make telephony 1.0, telephony 1.1 and 1.2, but really to lift it to a completely new level that follows the service expectations that customers have in the 21st century, I guess. Yeah.
Right. Yes, and you've throughout your what you've told us, the theme is that of programmable communications and trying to push that forward. And you've mentioned that in your current position, although you are open to using open source, and you do, but it's about the best of breed, and the best things to achieve what you need to do. But one of the themes that I've picked up is that theme of community. And wanting to contribute back. And of course, that's one of the reasons that you were at CAMAT World. So I wonder, as we come towards an end of our time together, Sebastian, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that and the kind of community aspect of these things.
Yeah. I can. So I guess for me and the projects I was in, it's less like code contributions back. Of course, whenever I used open source, and I was paying on behalf of DT for extensions, I've seek to agreements where we had let's say, good rate, and whatever we do, it becomes open source, right? So it's right. I didn't want to foster proprietary, like an integration into a proprietary render database. We could have done it just for us for more money, or we could have done it for less money, and it's open to the community. And here I was really not just money driven. Of course, it's important, but I was also, I used so many things that other people did before and somebody paid for. So why not do the stuff we pay for also for everyone? Because in the end, everyone will benefit, I guess. So that was our one project where we did actually contribute back, not ourselves, but through kind of sponsoring it, if you wish. And the other projects, it's really what I mean with community. is also more or less the like showing what certain tools can do, and within the carrier community, I guess also showing that what I do is in a way not rocket science, right? It's not. We hear. I was going through my slide decks the other day in 2014. I was on a telco API conference where carriers spoke about APIs, and I'm in many meetings, and you have people try to do like a lot with APIs. In the end, it's really simple to get started with it. The software's out there. That if you're not really experienced with it, you can get help. But I think that's also kind of giving back, is sharing these experiences, right? And that's in a way what we're doing here, I guess. It's I'm doing this from my personal view, so there is no like press release or official spokesperson of DT here saying we are using it. But me working there and saying I'm using it now, I've used it in my previous roles, I guess encourages others. And I've had many meetings with I remember some IMS World where I talked with a small carrier. Don't know where from. It's like some, I don't know how you say, developing country, I guess. They had just a 4G network just for data, and they were wondering, because I've mentioned Camelio, they're wondering if they can do an IMS with it, right? So it was like back then, I don't know how far Carson's platform was from NG Voice, but I was just saying, basically sharing what I did in Slovakia, saying, hey, I did this, I used the software, we've integrated the product. If you just want to do telephony on top of it, you can use that. You don't even need IMS for it. You can, I guess, build IMS. Find somebody competent and ask them, right? It's in the end, a lot is out there, and getting the things together is something you can do with an integrator and a software company. And if they cannot do what you need, they have other connections. And I guess this whole community aspect, and that is relevant for big companies like DT as well as others. It's not just the small companies that should use it. It's really also the big companies, and we should talk about it. We should share it, and I guess that will encourage like the next generation. So like I was encouraged by seeing what's possible, and that in the end, an open SIPs or Camelio can route a SIP message exactly the same way as a commercial stack, but you have much more flexibility, right? That's I guess what yeah.
Yes, thank you, Sebastian. That's a great point. When people think about open source projects and giving back, the first thing that comes to mind is code contribution. And of course, you've covered that in terms that, you were not a programmer, you weren't looking to be a programmer, but you were open to contributing financially to have other people do things. But aside from code contribution, people think of maybe testing and reporting bugs, or maybe documentation. But I think you've hit a very important point there in terms of knowledge sharing and conveying your own experiences in order to help the next generation of users and potential developers. So that's a great point.
By the way, DT is doing it. So DT is doing a lot in open source. It was they have a unit there, they have a repository there. So they do a lot there. It's just that in my projects, right, our approach was not really, since I didn't have big development teams, it was not doing stuff and contributing. I think whoever can should do it, but we nevertheless we still contributed somehow back. And of course, bug reporting is the same thing, right? We are using maybe different channels, but in the end, everything we report or everything we work out, that are the learnings everyone benefits from. And I also did the other day a bug on GitHub, for example, for commercially used software on our end, right? So it's I guess it's those things where we as I said, we've benefited a lot from the work others did and from how others used it. So that's I think it's very natural that we also, at least following this philosophy here, that we do the same way. Of course, there are SLAs that you need to keep and so on, but besides that, anyways, in the end, it will lead to better software, and that's what everyone will benefit from. Yeah. Yes,
absolutely. Well, Sebastian, thanks very much for coming in and sharing your knowledge and experience and some of the things you've been up to. Just as we come to a close, is there anything else you'd like to say to the ClueCon Weekly audience?
Is there anything else? Well, we are, I don't have the link now, but there is on the developer platform that I'm involved in, where I provide the Programmable Telecoms API. There is a hackathon planned actually for, I think, a week or two on top of the DT smart voice ecosystem that's going to be released as open source actually. So the SDK is going to be released as open source. There's a hackathon coming up. Maybe people listening in here are interested. to build skills on top of that platform. Otherwise, yeah, our platform will also eventually leave the MVP state and become hopefully available. And yeah, I encourage everyone to try it. I encourage everyone to give feedback, be critical, and yeah, we want to build a product basically that's that can not compete necessarily with other carriers, but with Twilio and the likes. So that's why I think we are very dependent also on feedback, and we appreciate it, of course.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. It's been very kind of you to come in and have a chat, Sebastian. So the only thing that remains for me to do is to say thank you very much. We're grateful for you coming in, and I hope I get to see you before too long, maybe in a real life gathering like another Communications World or something along those lines. So thank you very much, and bye for now.
Thanks as well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.